Pot Limit Omaha. You get 4 cards. 5 cards come on board. You must use exactly 2 cards from your hand. Those are the rules. So we're going to, play by the rules. And mostly I am going to attempt to really talk through every player's range, and particularly my range and my decisions at every point in the hand. So here we go with the first hand. I've got really a fairly tragic hand. There's a game called Badoogie. This would be decent in that. But this hand we just fold in this game. In terms of, did I not do the thing? No, I did the thing. Okay, good. The thing being to make sure that hands are importing into my database program, which then shows up and pops up this HUD here, which can you see? Maybe you can't see it. I think you can. You should be able to see it. So far, I don't really have too many reads on what people's ranges are likely to be. This player has open limped, I believe, in the cutoff, and then this player left on the button, but it might have been the button. Regardless, it is generally not the best idea to limp. It's okay, but when we see someone limping, we can think more likely than not they're a weaker player. Basically, I wouldn't make a big assumption, but I'd think they're probably a weaker player. I know some outstanding players who do limp, so don't be dogmatic about that. I'm not going to be open limping, right? If somebody calls ahead of me, the big blind without raising, I might call behind them. Here now this player is raising, so it seems like they maybe have a couple different gears. And, we don't see anything. In general, from that position, a player will raise a little less than a third of their hands. Here, this hand might be decent. It might be playable. I'm going to fold it. If the ace were suited, I would definitely open raise. So without the suited ace, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold, and then I'm going to tag the hand in progress for pre-flop, and I'm going to review it after the session. We'll see whether that took. Okay, so on this board, I believe the button raised. It looks like there must have been a 3-bet, unless there was a flop bet and a call, because the most you could get in pre-flop would be... Oh, no, it could have been... Yeah, okay. Anyway, it would have been a pretty decent flop for my hand. I would have had top trips and won, but you can see how dominated I was by... Well, not really. I'm thinking the other hand. But, we don't really want to worry too much about, what would have been, right? The point there is they mostly just checked it down. Let's see whether the last hand did tag. It did, right? So I'm going to tag it as review, too, because I don't quite have this process internalized of always checking all the hands. So I'll say pre-flop so I remember. I mean, I folded pre-flop, so it's pretty obvious the question is pre-flop. But eventually I want to be able to filter for those pre-flop questions. Here, ace, deuce, 6-7. The 6-7's nice. It's nice to have an ace, but it's not suited to anything. I'm going to fold. I think fairly straightforward decision there. We have a raiser and 2 cold callers. So far this game's looking pretty good, right? We've seen someone open limp. We've seen not a ton of money go in the pot, but people are definitely raising and getting a three-way pot. Third pot there on queen jack deuce. I think they're usually supposed to be checking in this spot, like check range, but I don't think a lot of players are going to do that at PLO 100. Call it PLO 100 because it's $100 buy-in. The blinds are 50 cents and $1. It's a $100 max buy-in. You can buy in for as little as 30. And there can be some reasons to want to play shorter, but I'm always going to try to buy in for 100 and top off my stack because I want to get accustomed to playing at that depth. My goal with PLO 100 is not to beat PLO 100 for the sake of beating PLO 100. It's to learn solid fundamentals that I can translate to the higher limits. And here it looks like the cutoff bet flop, right? And got a fold. Now jams here. They could have a hand like Jack, Queen Jack. Those are very reasonable hands for them to have. They could have like Ace Queen of clubs maybe with some other big cards possible. Bluffs would be like Ace King Jack 10 or something. but I think mostly they're just going to have it there. Although we haven't seen a lot from this player besides they've raised a few times pre-flop. I think they've mostly taken it down without a showdown. So there was a hand we could go back and look at and see what they had, but we don't have a ton of data on them. 10-9-9-7, pretty decent. No suits, so that's a negative, but we do have this player open limping the button. And a couple things. One, it gives us great pot odds. We've got 5-1. So anything with some hope of like flopping strong, which this hand really can flop very strong. We're hoping for that 9-8-6 flop where we flop the nuts and top set, right? But here we have the wrap, right? So Jack 10-9-8-7. So if a 7 comes, a 9, a 10, or a queen, that's nice. But there's a couple things working against us. One, only the 7 and the queen will give us the nuts, and also only the 7 and the queen not of clubs. So I'm actually leaning towards folding this hand. This player has been very active, but combining the factors that I'm out of position, there's a flush draw on board, and I've got a bunch of non-nutty. A 9 would be pretty nice because it would give us the second nuts and like a boat draw, right? A set. So I think that's a spot where I was definitely on the tighter side, and I think a call is reasonable and maybe even a raise, but it's not really a great spot. I think it's easy to overestimate. Now here I'm deciding between over limping, which I end up doing, and raising. I think maybe raising's a little better. My hesitance was from the small blind being very aggressive and kind of being concerned that they're going to 3-bet me. Of course, we haven't seen them 3-bet because nobody's really been raising very much so far. Getting heads up against the limper would be nice, but getting a big multi-way pot with this hand doesn't really strike my fancy. So I'm going to over limp it here, and I'm also going to tag this hand for pre-flop review. The question not being, should I play this hand? I'm pretty confident I should play this hand against one loose limper. The question is, would I rather raise or would I rather over limp? And I think either's probably fine, but I'm going to give some further thought to it later. For now, I want to think about my opponent's ranges. They both have 4 cards. They each have 4 cards. Probably not ace-ace, or they probably would have raised. Probably not king-king, because A, they probably would have raised, and B, I've got one of the kings, so it's pretty hard to have king-king. I think here I can just throw in like a half-pot bet, kind of keep it simple. I've got king-queen, so top pair, second kicker. That's going to be good a fair amount of the time, unless if my opponents show significant interest in the pot, I don't like my hand very much, right? Because I've got, a top pair hand and then a weak flush draw. But if my opponents don't like their hands that much, then my hand becomes pretty good, because there's just going to be a whole bunch of garbage that they're going to have to fold. I might get them to fold some straight draws, right? Because there's the flush draw out there. I have the flush draw. I don't think they're going to fold 2 pair, but if they have a hand like 5-4, I think I'm doing pretty well against them. So I think that was the sort of spot where it's like I'm not automatically betting because I'm in position and they check to me. I'm betting because they've shown a fair amount of weakness, disinterest in the pot, and against weaker ranges, my hand is quite good. Against strong ranges, it's kind of trash. Although against like random ace-ace, it's probably okay. All right, so here, I believe we got a pre-flop raise, flop check check, and then this loose player bets out on the turn. This loose player can have all of that, right? Those lower cards. I mean, they've played 86% of their hands. That's 6 out of 7, so it's not a big sample size. But when somebody's VPIP, I'll talk about the HUD briefly now. But when their VPIP is like in the 70s, 80s, even 60s, once we've gotten more than a few hands, once we've gotten like more than 5 hands, and it's still over 50%, it's often a pretty decent indication that they're probably pretty loose. Maybe more than like 6 hands or whatever. But yeah, so my HUD, I will explain my HUD. It is, these black panels here. What happens is I play hands, they get recorded into a database so that I can examine my play in the future. I can examine my opponent's play. Since these are anonymous tables, I can't use that information against my opponents in the future. If there were screen names, then I could make reads on people and then use that to try to figure out how I want to play against people going forward. But here, basically, this is just session data. This is, in this session, this player on my left has played 100% of their hands. So that first number is 100%. That's voluntarily put money in pot. So if they're the big blind and it checks around and they check, that doesn't count, right? That they didn't voluntarily put money in pot. They put it in involuntarily. It's the blind, right? But if they call a raise, that would count as voluntarily putting money in pot. If they raise themselves, that's voluntarily putting money in the pot. And here, this hand is pretty good. I can consider like a 3-bet with it. If I had a stronger read that this person was like really loose and aggressive, I might even just like go with it. But I'm just going to call. I think it'll play all right against them. And I think I can maybe check jam here. I've got the nut flush draw. I've got 2 overs, the nut no pair. I've got a gutter. And basically, I think my equity is pretty strong. Could be 50% or more on the flop. And so I'm going to get it in while I know my equity's good. And 44%. So, I mean, they had a great hand, right? I mean, they flopped, what did they flop? Was it bottom 2 pair? Yeah, they flopped bottom 2 pair and a gut shot flush draw, right? So, against that particular hand, getting the money in was slightly bad. It wasn't that bad, but it was slightly bad. And here, this hand is quite reasonable. I would play it from up front, but facing a button raise that's of a larger size because there's all these limpers, right? The structure of Pot Limit Omaha is such that when people call, then the raise can be larger. So I'm actually going to fold. I think playing this out of position is going to be fairly awkward, and the ace is not suited, right? An important thing about this hand, I've got 4 cards, all of which connect, but my flush draw is to the queen. It's not to the ace. In Omaha, we really want to be drawing to the nuts. So that's certainly a weakness of this particular holding. And, if we look at this flop, if it was suited like it to the hearts of ace, like this is a monster flop, right? But as it stands, it's actually still a really good flop because we have tons of straight outs, right? An ace, a queen, a 10, or a 9 all give us a straight, which happens to be the nut straight. And if it's a heart, we have the ace of hearts, so we're blocking the nut flush, which means if we have the straight, it's less likely that they're going to try and put a lot of action in. They're not going to have the best bluffing card. We have it. And if it's a brick that's a heart, then we have a very good bluffing hand. Trip 10s I'm not going to play. Having 3 of a kind in the hand is not very good in Pot Limit Omaha because you're only allowed to use 2 from your hand. So this means we could never make 4 10s because we can only use 2 of these cards in any hand. So that's not very helpful. All right. So I think, yeah, this is the same player, this player number 6. So I'm going to go ahead and mark them as green in my HUD. I think, we're looking at them. It's pretty clear that they're a loose passive player. Now, their voluntarily put money in the pot went down because I have things filtered for different numbers of players, right? 4-handed or 5-handed, they were playing a really large percentage of their hands. But now we're playing 6-handed, and it's filtering for probably 5 to 6 players. So that percentage went down because we're not including the hands that were played like 4-handed. I'll get to the rest of the stats now, right? We've got, the first one is voluntarily put money in the pot. It's the percentage of times that they decided, I'm going to put more money in this pot. So it's like how many hands they're choosing to play. A high number usually is someone we want at the table. A low number, could still be someone we don't mind at the table, but it's not like we're not going to look at that player as like an asset to the game usually. Certainly not at these stakes. The next number is pre-flop raise percentage. You'll notice that player that I marked as green has a 0 pre-flop raise percentage. That means they've never decided, oh, let's make it more before the flop. Good players usually want to make it more because we choose good hands to play, and then we want to put more money in the pot, and our opponents are then stuck like putting more money in the pot with their wide range or folding a bunch of hands. And getting them to fold hands is good. Let's get back to the action here. Pretty poor flop for me. It's a lot of bricks. right? Like just low cards, but somebody could have a straight already. My opponent could have a straight already. I'm going to check it back. If a jack rolls off, if a heart rolls off, I've got a pretty nice, I've got, something going on. But here, jacks as an overpair are much weaker in PLO than they are in Hold'em. So again, I'm just going to check it back. And if we get a free showdown with jacks, like that's cool. If my opponent had a flush draw, fine. They probably had a ton of outs with it. And the point is we can't really play against their hand anyway. We can't see what their hand is. We have an idea of their range. Their range is going to include, a bunch of this and that. I could have tried to just take the pot at some point, but I do have some showdown value. And I'm not blocking any of the strong hands, so I'm just going to check it back. I'm going to win sometimes. They had 3 queens. Not the best hand to play pre-flop. But we can see they probably had an equity advantage. Let's see. Oh, it doesn't. It's not popping that up. Why isn't it popping up the equities? Okay. I believe this hand is worth a raise. Not super confident. So again, I'm going to mark this tag hand in process and in progress for pre-flop. And we're going to look at this one as well after the game. So on a board like this, I'm usually just going to check as the out of position player whether I raised or not, right? It's just not a great situation. I'm going to check here also specifically like my hand is not very good. I've got a gut shot to the nuts and I have a backdoor flush draw, and this ace of spades is not a backdoor flush draw, right? It's just a blocker. If 2 spades roll off, I do not have a flush. So I'm going to go ahead and fold. I should have topped off first. That's sort of the habit in ignition, is you have to top off before you fold so that the chips actually get there for the next hand. You'll notice I have 92 instead of 100. Not ideal, but whatever. It's fine. So the next stat, we'll go back to that, pre-flop raise percentage. So this player, it says 0, and that's because we're 6-handed, and the HUD's kind of freaking out a little bit right now. When we had more players, or fewer players rather, that number was a little higher. So now after this hand, if we play a hand 5-handed, it might reset. I've got to check out my, what are they? I'm going to actually make a note to myself. That's going to pop up here. I'll bring it over there. What do I want to say? Check number of players filtering for HUD. Because it's doing some weird stuff. I don't really want it to hop around this much, so maybe I'll filter for like 4 to 6-handed, because we get a lot of 4-handed, but not so much. We don't have these sessions that are long enough that we're really going to have a significant statistical sample. All right, so strong hands for both players, right? One player had aces, the other one had double suited king high rundown, which is a very nice hand. Very good hand to try and crack aces with, too. Let me see if we display last hand. Does it show? Yeah, pre-flop, this hand had 42%. Aces only had 58% because the one hand is a really good hand to crack the other with. All right, second nut flush. Do we want to pile money in the pot? Not really. If our opponent gets really excited about this flop, we're in questionable shape. Now, though, they check back the flop. I think my hand's probably good. I'm going to bet the turn. And then I'll make a small bet on the river as well. I want them to come along with like 1 pair hands, 2 pair hands, certainly smaller flushes. I think a player like this that's kind of loose and passive, they're probably going to call with like all their flushes. I don't think they're the sort that's going to be like folding flushes because, oh no, they might have the nuts. When they fold, I think they probably just like don't have anything, and that's fine. And if they have a 2 pair hand that they fold, that's fine too, right? We've charged them. So now we see we're down to 3-handed, and their VPIP bounced back to 88, right? Because the fewer players at the table, the higher percentage of hands you should be playing anyway. But you'll see there's a lot of turnover in these games because PLO stacks go in, bets get big, and people go bust. And it's an anonymous player pool. People aren't like, oh, let me sit down for a 5-hour poker session. They're just kind of like, all right, I'll play some hands. Here, very bad board for our hand. Our range does pretty well, all right, because we've got like all the pocket aces. They don't have any pocket aces. I'm going to check it back. Usually I want an ace to bet this flop or some kind of a really big draw. Here I don't have a really big draw. I need like a king to make a good hand, and this board just didn't come out in any kind of really nice way. My tens have a little bit of showdown value. I could bet trying to get an ace to fold, but I'm just not even gonna. I think there's some merit to it. They actually made a flush and turned out. I don't know whether, like, if I potted it, they probably fold, right? But usually I want some kind of board interaction. I did have one heart, and that makes it less likely. I think I did, right? Yeah, I had the 9 of hearts. So that makes it a little less likely that they have a flush. But, and again here, I just don't have, very much board interaction. I've got some draws and stuff, and against this, I'm just going to min bet and, like, see if they fold ace high or king high. And they had a pair, so that's fine. Usually I want some sort of blocker to be bluffing in a spot like that. But since there's 2 pairs on board, it's actually really hard for them to have anything, because so many of the cards that would go well with the board are on the board. So I think it's okay to just kind of fire out there. It's possible that was an overcorrection to not bluffing the previous hand. I don't know, but I think it seems okay. I've got middle pair and a gut shot. Some promise, but not something I'm really going to get excited about or put too much money in. I'm going to now remember to top off and then fold. Middle pair is just, it's not really doing very much here, right? And when that bottom card paired, that was like the worst card that could come. Because now bottom pair is beating me, top pair is beating me, better middle pair is beating me. It's just not really the sort of situation or board that I'm looking for. All right, so this hand I was definitely going to play. It's a nice hand on the button. Do I want to play it against an open raise? Well, the big blind is very loose and passive, so I want to play hands with them. I think this flops pretty well. The flush draw is to the jack. If I catch like the 9 of diamonds and a 10, I've got a really nice, or the 9 of diamonds and any other diamond, I got a really nice flop. So we want to look at our hands and think like, can I flop really well? And how many flops am I going to flop well on? Now, here, the board's already paired. Very easy for either of my players to have a 10. I could hit a 9, but I'd have the underfill, so I'd be losing to 10-6, 10-9. Not a great spot. I'm just going to go ahead and fold. I do have a backdoor flush draw and a gut shot, but on a paired board, flushes and straights, not the best. As always, feel free to ask questions or leave comments. I'll try to respond, but I am playing with a delay, so responses won't be immediate. It'll be, gradual. Yeah, so this player posted, right? That's not a limp. It's important that we don't go, oh, somebody put in the dollar, let's mark them as a limper. No, putting in the dollar might be a little questionable. You usually want to wait till the big blind. Software's a little goofy, so I try not to read too much into that. But they did buy in with a shorter stack, which often means, not like a super strong player, generally. But again, we don't want to read too much into that, right? I think there's this balance between seeing small amounts of data and extracting useful information from small amounts of data, but not taking what we extract and holding it with a high level of certainty, right? So we can see that and see their stack size, see they posted, see how they played the hand even, and go like, they're probably this kind of player. But not like they are this kind of player. They do this, they do that. Like, no, we saw they do buy in for 40, right? We know that. And this hand, 4 cards, 9 and higher. There's going to be a lot of like rainbow boards that I think are going to be pretty good. And that's neither rainbow nor pretty good. So pretty easy, just check give up here. And I guess if we catch a queen on the turn, then that's of some interest. But we get a full pot bet from the button. So this is a very passive player from what we've seen so far, being very aggressive now. And I think that's something that should always make our, our ears perk up, make our spidey sense tingle. They're thinking a lot now, though, so that kind of suggests maybe they didn't flop a huge amount. They flopped a draw, a flush draw, and a gutter, and then they turned another gutter. So it seemed like a really clear call to me there on the turn, I think. It wasn't a great flush draw, but if you're going to put in, 12 with it on the flop and put the rest in on the turn, eh? Alright, so set of sixes isn't fantastic, but no one raised, so it's unlikely someone has a set of kings. Set of nines is possible, and 8 will give us the nuts. I do think leading out here into the field in a kind of loose passive field has some merit. I can also check, if there's tons of betting and raising, then I can think, my set of sixes probably isn't that good. I'm not looking at this going like, ooh, I want to get all the chips in. I'm looking at it going, I have a pretty good hand. I can thin the field a little bit, bet for value. There's going to be a lot of bad turn cards, and with fewer opponents, it's going to be a little easier to navigate those cards. Now, this is a very bad card because all the straight wraps, like 10-7-8, 8-7-5, all got there. Plus, I have a 7, so now it's going to be a little harder for me to make a full house. So, what do I want to do here? I almost want to fold. It's really annoying because most cards, I think I would have a pretty clean call here. I no longer have this gut shot to the nuts. My gut shot would be the second nuts, which is okay-ish. Let's just do some pot odds. We're getting 2.5 to 1, a little bit less. And how many outs do we have? We would have 10 outs, but we only have 9 outs because... but then we have another 3 probably. So call it like 11. It's pretty close. It's pretty close. The reason I'm going to fold, and I think it's a very tight fold, is because none of the cards that come, the 1-6 left in the deck gives me the nuts, but if an 8 comes, I can't put a lot of money in confidently because, first of all, my straight's very obvious, so it's going to be hard to get a lot of value from somebody who's paying any attention. And second, it's not the nuts, so they can have the nuts and they can raise, and then maybe I fold. And with the bottom set, if any of the cards pair above me, then all of a sudden I have the worst full house. So if I'm up against something like King 9 and I make a good call on the turn, then a King or a 9 come, then I can be in a lot of pain on the river. And more importantly than necessarily having a high chance of losing the pot and losing a lot of money, I can't play my hand with confidence, right? I can't play it aggressively. There's no way I can win the maximum when I am good because I'm so far away from the nuts, right? Because there's so many hands that beat me. And that's really, I think, a pivotal concept in Pot Limit Omaha is this idea of proximity to the nuts. And, the closer we are to the nuts, not only is the more likely that our hand is good, but the more confidence we can play our hand with and the more money we can make when our hand is good. Whereas when we're further away from the nuts, not only is it more likely that we're going to lose, but we also can't win as much when we win because our opponents are going to be... because we just have to be cautious, right? We have to respect the fact that it's not that hard to make the nuts in PLO. You get 4 cards. And it's not that hard to make the third nuts either, right? It's really easy for someone to have King 10 in PLO. It's a lot harder to have King 9 in that hand, sorry. To have King 9 and Hold'em. You get 2 cards. Here you get 4. So... overall, this game looks very good. I'm very happy with it. This hand, I'm going to raise. It's 4 cards with 1 gap. The gap is at the top, though. The 8 is missing, which means I'm not going to get as many good flops as I would if the gap were at the bottom, if the 6 were missing, right? And here I flop middle pair with really nothing else, just a blocker to the flush draw. So I'm going to check and pretty much fold. This person I'm noticing is betting a lot when I'm checking. So when I do make a hand, I'm still going to do a lot of checking and probably check raise this person fairly mercilessly. And here just let's top off and then fold. Not a board that we can play with any sort of confidence. Yeah, our 9's good sometimes, but it's really hard for it to have good equity. We don't even have a good 9. And then here they limped, and technically it is an open limp, but there's a post of $1 behind them. So in this 3 blind scenario, I view it differently than an open limp in a 2 blind scenario. I hope that makes some sense. It's not that it's literally a different thing to do, but I mean, it's literally a different scenario, right? So we shouldn't view it with quite the same lens. We should understand maybe they're only limping because it's already going to be a multi-way pot, and I think there's a little bit of logic to that. We notice that their PFR, the second number, is 17 out of 6 hands. So that means they raised one hand out of the 6 hands they were dealt. And, you know, good players usually are going to raise a fair percentage of the hands that they decide to play. So these VPIP and PFR numbers are usually going to be fairly close. Getting back to the rules of Omaha for a moment, you'll notice I folded the 2, 3, and 5 of hearts, and the 4 and 6 of hearts are on board. I would have flopped a straight, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of hearts I cannot play because I can only play 2 of the cards from my hand. So, you know, a good thing to always remind yourself of until it's just completely intuitive. You don't even have to think about it. You know, this would not be a great scenario if I were still on the hand, and somehow I would have made trip 5s with a straight, but not a flush. But if I could use one card from my hand, then I would have a full house, 6, 6, 5, 5, 5, right? But I can't. I have to use 2, so I'd have to use, you know, the 5 and the 10 to make trip 5s, and then I could only use one of the 6s. But really, I would use the 2 and the 3, and it would make me a straight. Getting back to the HUD, the third number is pre-flop 3-bet percentage. So the percentage of times that somebody had the option to re-raise after somebody raised before the flop, and that they did so. You'll see I'm at 0. People haven't been raising that much, so this number is going to be out of like a really small sample, 0 out of 5. The player on my right probably did 1 out of 5. Yeah, so that's the only player who's 3-bet at all so far. I think that was that hand where they had aces against like the king high rundown. So, you know, that was so now this player open limped in a normal scenario, right, without any blinds. So now we're going to mark that. And if we look at their overall stats, we can think, this is probably a loose passive player. And again, I'm going to check. I just don't have very much here. I've got a pair of 10s that doesn't play very well in Pot Limit Omaha against, you know, a king high board. Even against somebody who's, you know, open limping with who knows what. Now I've got a straight draw going to the ocean, but I think my 10s might win. But if they bet, I'm going to say they probably won't win. I'll top off and I'll fold. It's just, you know, they're betting pot. I have one pair. And it doesn't even beat top pair. You don't really need to be making hero calls in spots like those. By and large, hero calls in PLO are like you have the second nuts and they put a lot of pressure in. Obviously, I'm simplifying things. And to clarify, in case anybody's unclear on sort of the theme of this series, I'm not an expert at Pot Limit Omaha. I've played a fair amount of it and done, you know, well enough, but my goal is to become one. And so this is sort of my journey of studying the game, trying to improve over time. Today I'm explaining some more of the basic stuff. I won't continue doing that as the series goes on, unless people ask questions. Always welcome to ask questions. But overall, what I want to do is kind of lay some of the foundation, and then going forward, really try to refine my game and sort of show what that process is like. At the end of this live session, I'm going to do a session review, and over time, that process is going to change. I haven't been doing systematic session reviews nearly enough. I used to do them after every single session, and I had really good results, and I stopped doing that after session, and my results weren't as good. So it seems pretty clear, and there's something loud going on outside. Now I'm going to mark these players as green because I think they are pretty clearly people that we want at the table. I basically have, like, I pretty much just mark players as like, yeah, I want to keep playing if this person's at the table. And then if they're like really out of line, I'll mark them pink. And I'm like, I really want to keep playing if this person's at the table. And then everybody else I kind of, you know, don't really make big markings on. If I could have more categories if I were playing, not so much longer sessions, but like on a site with names, right? Here, these people are going to disappear into the ether. The fact that somebody was marked green is going to be completely irrelevant. It's kind of just for table selection and a little bit of a focus, right? And one of the reasons that I mark like open limp here is mostly so that this note will go away when this player leaves. And when that happens, then I'll look at the HUD and be like, oh, that doesn't apply to the player who just sat down if it's green, right? Because the new player won't have been marked green. One moment. Okay, so back to the action. We had a raise and a call pre-flop. We get a full pot bet on 8-7-4 with a flush draw. So a hand like 5-6 here is the nuts. But if you're really deep stacked, or maybe like in a multi-way pot, you want to be a little bit cautious with it because there's a lot of hands that can be a big favorite to the what is okay. So they had kings. Kings are not that good on that board. That's one thing. That's a takeaway there. Kings are not that good on that board. The other player had a set, which is good on that board, but not the nuts. Not to say that they should only get it in with the nuts. They definitely, let's see, if we display last hand, 13% equity against 87% equity. It's a pretty strong advantage. The 7 gave the other player 3 outs on the turn. They could have hit a king or a 7 for quad 7s. They did make a full house, but it was no good because the other person had top set. That's the difference between top set and bottom set, right? If they flop top set, this person makes a runner boat. Pocket 4s are no good there on the river. Right, the person who had the random 7 and the pair of kings made 7s full of aces. That beats 4s full, but it does not beat 8s full. So, all right. I suppose the button probably raised here because the big blind does not really do very much raising. It's a flop that I think you're probably going to do a fair amount of checks, especially against a loose big blind. They're going to have a lot of this like 8-6 region. Very easy for them to have the nuts, 2 pair. If you're in position with a hand like aces, it doesn't feel all that comfortable, or kings or queens or whatever, some overpair thing. I need to drat. I need to get that thing where you block the people who do the thing. Can I? No. Okay. Oh well. No. Sorry. Some Twitchaments. Okay, this hand I'm going to raise. It's maybe a little questionable. We're going to mark it and review it in our post-session pre-flop review. I think it's good. 7s connect with the 8, they connect with the 4. We got a pair that's not very big, but double flush draw. The double flush draw, especially if we get heads up, gives us a lot of chances, a lot of ways to have like a little extra equity, right? So like here, we actually have a straight flush draw. I'm going to check it back. I'm not blocking the jack, I'm not blocking the 10. I do have a straight flush now. That's a pretty good hand. It's worth noting it's not the nuts, right? I don't have the nuts. So I'm not calling because I don't have the nuts. I'm calling because I'm going to raise the river. But, if they bet and I raise and they jam, okay, so now I'm just like hoping they have a boat, right? So I'm going to raise. And again, I don't have the nuts, but my hand's probably good here. I could make it a little bit less. But I really want to win the maximum against a full house. I could mark this hand and see tomorrow, like what they had, right? And I think that's sometimes worth doing. But, yeah, straight flushes are fun. Let's see. I'm going to mark this at, I think pre-flop. I wanted to mark it as pre-flop, right? And then I will also mark it as, I think this strange hand is the thing where then I look and I see, could I have bet less and gotten them to call with like a straight jack? Would they have called with all of their flushes? Maybe. So maybe I could have done an exploitative smaller raise, right? And against some players, like if they're going to jam their boats, then I want to make the smaller raise because I'm going to get the whole enchilada anyway if they have a boat, right? If they have Jack 10 and they're like, well, if they have a straight flush, so be it. I'm gonna just do this. I'm gonna go for it. But yeah, I don't know how to make this chat thing not weird. Okay. Anyway, back to the grind. Enough of straight flushes, and it's always nice making a straight flush, except when it loses and there's no bad beat jackpot. That would not be super fun. There are like no bonuses here on Ignition, so this is the opposite of I think YouTube will like ban you or either ban your video or demonetize it or whatever if you they made a straight against the other player had aces and ended up with, I think, turned a flush draw. All right, let's focus on this hand, not demonetization. But yeah, I am certainly not endorsing any given poker site. Not a whole lot of bonuses here on Ignition. Aces on this board. This player we've noticed has been betting a lot, right? And I'd be inclined to fold this against a lot of players, but against this player, I'm going to call one at least. Not a great turn card. The 9-8 got there. A lot of other things got there. There is a flush available now. A boat got there. I have the ace of hearts, so I'm kind of tempted to make a small river bet, like as a blocking bet, and maybe even get value from like a jack. Okay. They had... Okay. Yeah, they made this the rowboat, right? The small boat. And then this, maybe we play, maybe a little loose. Not certain. Again, these early sessions, I'm mostly going to be marking hands to review how I'm playing pre-flop, right? Especially raise first in. That's kind of like what I want to focus on. Sometimes you just need to focus on one element of your game, build it. This is a board we're going to check a lot in general, but I'm going to go with a little bit bigger bet size because the board's pretty wet. There's a lot of straight draws. There's a flush draw. The thing I don't like about this bet size, after, sometimes we make a play and then we go, I'm not sure about that. The thing I don't like is I have top set, so it's hard for them to have like top pair, right? But then maybe a bigger bet size makes sense because they're not necessarily going to call a bigger bet size with top pair anyway. I'm not sure. But some things to think about there, right? Again, that's not my priority right now. My priority is making sure that like I'm just playing the right hands in the first place, right? That I'm not playing a whole bunch of hands I shouldn't be playing, and that I'm not folding a bunch of hands I should be playing. Just get those pre-flop open raise ranges right, the RFI, raise first in, and nail that down. And once I do that, three things will happen. One, I'll be playing good ranges before the flop when I raise first in. Two, I will have a clearer idea of how my reasonably good opponents, what their ranges look like before the flop in certain positions. People who maybe learned from similar systems. And then three, I'll free up some mental energy, right? I will no longer be spending time, energy, brain power, emotional energy, right? Like thinking, oh, should I play this hand? Should I not? Kind of being kind of tied up, like having feelings and thoughts about my pre-flop range. It'll just happen, basically. So here after the flop, I've got a gutter to the nutter. So a jack would give me the nuts. I have a backdoor flush draw to the queen, and I have middle pair. And against some players, like if this person had open raised and they were like really aggro, maybe I call. Against a loose passive player who decides to pot it, like, I think I can just fold. If they bet $1, I call $1, right? We should call more when they bet less, and we should call less when they bet more. It's just structural, right? Like, it should imply that they have a better range when they bet more. It may or may not be true, but it should be true, and we're just getting worse odds. So, on the other hand, like, if I call a pot-sized bet and then I spike the nuts with, like, a backdoor to the flush, maybe I can, like, get some money. Bigger pot becomes a bigger pot. Yeah, because it's pot limit, right? You can't win a big pot without building a big pot. You can't bet a lot unless there's already money in the middle. And here, this feels like I could overlimp, I could fold. I don't think it's a hand I want to be raising with. I'm actually going to make what feels like a sort of tight, disciplined fold. The reason being, there's 2 limpers, and I have a loose player behind me. And this hand, we actually don't really want to be expanding our ranges a bunch more when we have these multi-way pots. And here's why. These hands on the cusp play better heads up, actually, because I can make a pair of queens and it can be good. I can make the second nut straight and it can be good. Whereas when we're multi-way, a pair of queens ain't worth nothing, right? I mean, that's like garbage. A second nut straight is much more dangerous multi-way. So I think by and large, I want to tighten it up a little bit more when there are multiple limpers, when I'm in a very loose game, and I want to just really be pushing with my strongest hands we want to get in a position where we can dominate someone, right? And this isn't really a hand that's going to do a whole lot of domination. So this feels close also, right? The ace is suited, ace-jack connects, jack-7 connects, 7-4 connects, 4-ace connects. None of them connect well. And we have the third card of the suit. And we have a loose passive player behind us. So again, if I raise here, I'm probably going to get 2 calls. I could just call. That's a thing. But it's not a thing that I'm going to build into my 6-max online game. So yeah, I decided to just lock it down. Just play on the tighter side. I mean, if you look at my stats, I've played a third of my hands, which I think is probably a little bit on the high side for Pot Limit Omaha. I've raised about 2/3 of the hands I have played, which is probably about right. You can tend towards being even more aggressive within the hands you play. I think could be even better, but I think in a game like this, having a fair amount of cold calls makes a fair amount of sense. And that's not to say to have a really wide range, but it's to say there's a lot of hands where maybe we just want to put in one bet and then have a really big edge post flop. Okay, interesting board. I have the nut flush blocker. I have aces. I have a gut shot to the nuts. I am going to check. Mostly just I'm not betting a lot in this situation 4 ways, right? If I had a king, I'd be a little more apt to bet. And this person makes a small bet. I think I will. No, I think I just have to fold. I really need the nut flush draw, I think. One thing to look at is, yes, I have the nut flush blocker, right? So if a diamond comes, I can represent the nuts. My opponents can't have the nuts, so I can represent the nuts. Very important thing in Pot Limit Omaha, right? In Omaha, if you're blocking the nuts, then... Oh, this doesn't feel good. This feels like I'm losing my internet connection. No, okay, everything's fine. False alarm. I had some internet, issues yesterday. I'm going to check again. Now I have a pair of 6s to go with my pair of aces, but I can't play both. Now I have aces and kings, which is the best 2-pair hand, or 1-pair hand, really. So I can't lose to 2-pair. So it's a pretty nice river card. If somebody had like 5-6 or 8-6, I'm beating them. If somebody had a king, then I'm all of a sudden losing. But getting back to the nut blocker, with those opponents in the pot against me, those aren't the players I'm going to try to get to fold like the second nuts, right? I'm not going to do a whole bunch of like nut blocking bluffing. Mostly I'm going to bluff here and there where I feel like they're very weak, and they're like, I'm watching Netflix, and I'm like, whatever, fold. And here I have a gut shot and an overpair, none of my suits, very straightforward, just fold. But yeah, and then the other player in the pot, who I don't have a lot of information on, they only had $50, and there was 14 in the middle. So if they bet like 7 and I call 7, there's 28 in the middle, and there's like 43 back. So we end up getting situations where we're not going to be able to apply a lot of pressure because there's not a lot of money left in the stacks. So in order to run those like nut blocker bluffs, we want players who are willing to fold, and we want players with whom we're deep enough that we can actually apply significant pressure, right? So that's not to say never do it against loose passive players. That's not to say never do it if you're short stacked. It's just to say those are counter indications, and we want to have some information that like makes us go like, oh yeah, this is a good spot. And so that didn't look like it was going to be a good spot. But it was a good spot to just like win with aces because nobody's all that interested in bluffing there. Did that person have the nuts? Was there a bet? I feel like there wasn't a bet. I feel like they just didn't bet the nuts. I think they river the nuts and then they go for something tricky. Oh, that person has set? Okay. Sometimes we want to go back and look at important hands to try and get some reads. It's a little... I mean, if you're one-tabling on a site like Ignition, you really do have the time to do it. So I'm going to pop it up and just look briefly at what was the action on the river in that hand. River... Oh, they were already all in? I don't understand. Yeah, I guess they were all in or something. Okay, never mind. Looks like the chips had already gone in. Not a very interesting hand. So we'll get back to the action. What are we at? 52 minutes? Yeah, we'll play a little bit longer, maybe another orbit or two. Like finish this orbit and one more orbit. And then I'm going to do a session review and try to both demonstrate and refine my process for improving my game. So if it folds to me, I will raise this hand. Against a raise, I'm very torn. I think I just fold this hand. I don't know. The player behind me is loose and passive. I'm not too worried about getting 3-bet. So the important factor that I didn't state, but that was like this, right, is that this is like the only player at the table who seems to know what they're doing, right? Hopefully besides myself. But, they're playing 21% of their hands. They're raising 17%. They probably have a pretty decent range when they're open raising the hijack. And two things. One, against a stronger range, my hand's not as good as it is against a weaker range, right? And two, they're more likely to play better post-flop, which is also sort of a counter-indication to getting involved. 3, this loose passive player in front of them had already folded, and that's a player I'd like to play hands with. So yeah, there was a weaker player behind me who I'd like to play hands with, but it wasn't an ideal situation, right? And we don't need to only play hands in ideal situations, but we want to be aware of all the factors, and over there, overall, they kind of pointed like, nah. I'm not even going to mark that one. I know that that's a hand that I would play in like earlier position, but I think the weakest hands that I want to play like for an open raise and the low jack or the hijack, I'm probably going to want to fold against an open raise from the low jack or the hijack, or under the gun, or like middle position or early position, whatever you want to call them. To just address my hand here, ace, king, 8-6. King high flush draw, not as good as an 8 high flush draw. The 8 and the 6 are kind of good. They work together. And the ace and the king are kind of good. So I'd say if this were a suited ace, maybe I'd play it. And I'll tag this hand too. And we'll just review a whole bunch of hands pre-flop this session. And mostly just trying to get a better sense, to refine these especially refine these pre-flop open raises, right? Oh, they're making a lot of sound outside. Sounds like they're whacking the weeds. Yeah, okay. The button limps here. I can just tell by there's 285 in the pot and there's 2 blinds are in, so I didn't notice, but they clearly did. And then this is probably another player I want to play against. So overall, you know, these games are fantastic, which is not to encourage you to come play them with me. You know, don't need any other reasonable players. But overall, Pot Limit Omaha just has, like, the games are just better than No Limit Hold'em. And I just think it's a more fun game. Like, you get more cards, there's more possibilities. There's not that there aren't tons of subtleties in No Limit Hold'em, but it's just, I don't know, it's never really captured my imagination in a very big way. So it's been harder to study, and I'm hoping, for some reason, Limit Hold'em just, like, it just made an intuitive sense to me. No Limit Hold'em always felt a little, I don't know, sort of not really grounded in a way. And I've just always enjoyed Pot Limit Omaha. It's a very fun game. It's a game where the fact that it's fun, I think, encourages a lot of people to play poorly also, which is nice. You know, people have a lot of fun playing. Here, I have 2 pair, and it's a very clear call, I believe, for 50 cents. 2 pair is a pretty good starting hand most of the time. Now, there's a raise by a very, like, tight raiser, right? They're a very loose player, but they don't raise that much. So, I actually think there's a fair chance that they have a hand like aces. I'd love them to have aces, and I just want to flop a set. And the thing is, I have 2 pairs, so it's a lot easier to flop a set than it is in Hold'em. Now, I have queens, which is an overpair to this very, very wet board. And if I had more of a read against this player, like, maybe I would do something with this. But overall, it's important to recognize queens on this board in Omaha is not like queens on this board in Hold'em. Queens on that board in Hold'em are delighted. They're like, oh, you've got a lot of draws, you got a lot of top pair, middle pair, let's get some chips in. Whereas on this board in PLO, it's like they can have so many draws that have way better equity than your queens have. You know, which isn't to say overpairs don't have value. And in short stacked, you know, situations, they're actually probably going to have more value. But, you know, that wasn't my idea pre-flop, was like to have a wet flop and then have this player who had limped in decide to put a bunch of money in the pot. All right, so a couple of wheel cards. I have a small pair. If the ace was suited, I'm pretty happy with this hand. With the ace offsuit, I'm going to fold. And again, I'm going to mark this hand for the pre-flop review. And we're probably going to fairly quickly go through like maybe 10 pre-flop hands at the end of the session. So, yeah, we'll see. All right, we have raise from the small blind. And we'll have this be the last orbit. I've been pretty happy with my level of focus. This morning, I did a warm-up. So the warm-up was like the whole morning, basically, which was about an hour. I have a morning routine that I want to do every day, but I haven't established as a habit yet. So that's, aside from trying to do this stream every day and make a video from it every day, I really want to have this morning habit that will kind of flow into this, and I feel like I'm in a very good frame of mind to play my best poker, right? And, you know, before the session, I think I wrote some stuff down, but before the session, you know, I reminded myself, like, the point of playing the session isn't to have a good result in the session. The point of playing the session is to give it my best effort, my best focus, and to try to learn something from the session. And then each day to be a little better, right? And obviously there's variation in performance, so it's not like tomorrow's necessarily going to be better than today, but a month from now should be better than today, and a month from then should be better than then. And overall, you know, we get this incremental growth, and we end up where we not necessarily where we want to be, but we end up better than we are today, right? And so that's it for the session. I will observe this hand. Let's observe this hand and comment. So we have a limper from the hijack. It is this loose and passive player, and the button has overlimped. The small blind comes along, and we catch a four-way flop. King, 6, deuce, rainbow. The 3 on the turn completes the rainbow. 4 different suits for 4 different cards, but makes 4, 5 the nuts. So somebody could have a straight here. How likely are any of these players to have 4 or 5? I don't know, you tell me. Seems fairly reasonable that somebody could have it. I don't know why I'm being so weird. But, you know, pretty much anybody could probably bet on the turn and just take the pot, is my guess. 2 pair had to feel pretty decent on the turn also. But now the river 4 means anybody with a 5 just needs an ace, 2, 3, 4, 6, or 7 to complete a straight. But a 5 with like 3 queens in the hand would just be a pair of queens. And it looks like 2 pair, the bottom 4s and 2s, were fortunate to win the hand. I'm now going to review. How many hands is this? Let's see. 7 hands. Not bad. Most of them, I believe, are pre-flop questions. So I have these pre-flop charts here, which I got from the Upswing PLO Launchpad. Maybe I'll put a link in the link in the description below. And maybe at some point I'll be like an affiliate for that. I don't know, whatever. But for now, if you, I got value from it. I think if you're a new PLO player or a player who's played a fair amount but wants a little bit more solid foundation, I think it's great for that. If you're looking for something really advanced, probably not your thing. But they've got this whole thing with basically pre-flop raise first in. It doesn't give you a full, how to play everything pre-flop. So I would like something more like that probably costs more and is part of some other bigger course. Or you can buy those types of ranges online and learn from all that stuff. But what I'm going to focus on here is trying to apply that data to, first of all, my open raises. And second of all, to like stuff beyond that, right? Which means, well, we'll get into it. You'll see. Okay, so the question here is simply, do I want to open raise ace 3-3 deuce suited to the 3, right? So I'm going to try and take notes on these while I do it. It might not make for the perfect stream. So be it. And when I put these videos on like the YouTube, maybe I'll edit out sections. We'll see. So we have ace of spades, 2 of diamonds, 3 of diamonds, 3 of hearts, RFI and cutoff, or no? That's it. That's the question, right? So I'm going to go through these charts and see what we got. All right, somewhere we have a cutoff, raise first in. Now, this is not an ace-high hand. This is a pair of 3s hand. So if I look, pair of 3s, 3-3, ace-6. So that's a very similar hand, right? So with one suit, 3-3, ace-6, it wants to raise. So if the 2 were a 6, it would want to raise. Is a 2 better or worse than a 6? I think it's similar, right? If we catch a 4 and a 5, I think that's going to be a better flop here for this hand, because then an ace will make a straight, a 6 will make a straight. It's hard. It's a little tricky, but I think it's pretty similar. But the catch is I actually want the ace to be suited, right? And so, as I said, I guess fairly accurately, if the ace were suited, I would play it. But with the 3 suited, like making a 3 high flush, very much less, it's literally the worst possible flush compared to the best possible flush. So we're going to say fold is good. RFI if suited ace. Okay, so that's a thing that I can come back to and I can look at and remember, like, okay, this is this situation. I could make like a flashcard out of this hand, right? Where it was a spot that arose and I wasn't sure what to do. I did choose the right decision, but I was unsure. And so now I've reinforced not only, yes, that was correct, but also if the ace is suited, then I want to play it, right? So we folded, cool, we go to the next hand. All right, ace, king, 8-6, very similar. And then this is just going to be, do we want to play it or not, right? So we folded it, yeah. So let's go back, and I'll say ace of clubs, 8 of hearts, 6 of spades, king of hearts. And then the question is RFI in low jack or no? It's basically the same question, but a different position and different hands, right? So looking at this again, I said, okay, I think if the ace is suited, probably. Now the king suited is good. It's better than the 8 suited, but I think this hand's like enough on the cusp. But a king, ace king, I think is pretty good also, right? So let's give this a look. So this is an ace high hand. They've got ace and then 2 like 9 through 6 cards, 2 middle cards. Single suited ace king 9-7 looks very similar, right? And that hand you do play if the ace is suited, right? So this would be like barely a fold, and this is, you know, correctly identified as kind of a cusp hand. So ace king 8-6 with the ace king suited would be a fold probably, because ace king 9-7 is the weakest call, right? This would be slightly worse than that hand, but having the ace and the 8 suited is better than here in the guide they have the ace and the king suited. That's a little worse. So I think if this ace was a heart, or like make the 8 a club in this hand, and I think yes, we do want to play it. Make, you know, the ace a heart and the 8 a club, so the ace king is suited, then we don't want to play it. So that's, we don't need to like memorize those things. That's not the goal. The goal is to enhance our kind of intuitive sense. And I think so far I'm fairly happy with what my intuitive sense has been saying. So I'm going to say fold is good. RFI if ace 8 suited. Fold if A.K.A. suited. Very cuspy. Yes, we have adjectivized that word. Okay. Gonna have to say that a few times before I can say it. So this is another one, right? This, I believe this is just another, oh no, this is pre-flop and flop, right? So we're gonna look at this pre-flop, why not? 5 of spades, 9 of diamonds, 9 of clubs, jack of clubs. RFI on button or no. So this is a spot where I chose to play the hand and then marked it because of post flop, but I do think we can, you know, we can just double check. Let's double check whether we play this. I think it's questionable. Single suited, it wants 10-10-8 deuce. So 10-10-8 deuce compared to Jack-Jack 9-5 with a suit. Here the suit's to the Jack, there it's to the 10. The pair's a little lower. The dangler, though, isn't total garbage, and the high card is a little higher. So we have a Jack instead of an 8, right? So I think this hand is slightly better than the 10-10-8 deuce. So I'm going to say RFI is good. Dangler being non-useless is helpful, I'm going to say. So like with a deuce, a rainbow deuce, I think I probably fold it. But again, very close. Okay, so then flop bet size with top set. This question. This is a question I'm not going to get a definitive answer to. It's a 3-way pot. Both my opponents check, and I bet 3/4 pot. Now, overall, I need to think about what my bet sizes want to be in general. This is maybe not so much a question for today. It's something to just look at and think about and think, you know, did I bet a little more because I was afraid of like a bad card coming off and I didn't want to face that situation? Or did I bet a little more because I thought my opponents would call with a lot of those hands, and thus I charge them more, I get more money in the pot, and then, you know, just like, is this a pure strategic decision, or is it like a little fear-based? And I'm going to say I think it's a little of both. I do think that I had an element of, well, maybe I want to bet a little bit more so I don't face these tricky situations as much. And I don't want that, right? I want to let that go. I don't want to hang on to that feeling and make decisions based on that sort of thing going forward. But so I think like half pot probably is good, or like 60%. Maybe there's the kind of wet board where 60% is good. If I had middle set, maybe I like this a little more because maybe they're going to call it top pair. But then again, maybe I like it a little less because I really don't want to push someone off top pair. So I feel okay about this bet, but I think I'm going to say, unsure, probably bet half pot or 60%. I do think this being kind of a wet board, it's not like super wet, but it's got connectors and a flush draw. I think betting half or bigger is good. I don't want to bet like third on this pot, on this board, because this board is it's a little too connected. My opponents are loose. Let's get them to put some money in the pot. So I don't think this is horrible, but I think my reasons for making this bet were suboptimal. Right, so I can improve on that just in terms of the decision-making process. Let's go to the next hand. Okay, this one was interesting. 7-7-4-8. I raise again. Let's check this one out. I'm pretty confident. 7 of hearts, 7 of diamonds, 4 of diamonds, 8 of hearts. RFI in hijack or no? Because it's double suited and everything connects, I feel pretty good about this as an open raise. But they have let's see, 6-6-7-5 with a 7-6 suited. Oh no, that's single suited. King 9-9-6. Yeah. I mean, this is hijack. They want to open raise 3-3 King Jack. Double suited. I mean, having the higher cards is nice. 6-6-5 deuce is the closest analog, right? 6-6-5 deuce is basically like this hand, but all the cards 2 ranks lower. If we subtract 2 from each of these, 8-7-4 to 6-5 deuce, right? So I think this is a clear raise. Clear RFI. So having 3 cards with a decent pair, double suited, that all connect into the same sort of straight region, I think pretty clearly we're going to play that in the hijack. And just briefly, I'm going to say, hey, what about the low jack? Do we play that in the low jack? And it looks like 7-6-6-3 we play, so 8-7-7-4 we must play, right? Double suited, very important double suited. If it's rainbow, it's just the garbage. So we toss it then. I think, Yeah, we're not playing it when it's... Yeah. Okay. So, we raise, and we get a call from the small blind from a loose passive player. Pretty good situation. We flop the gutter to the straight flush, and I think the flop is... I'm not going to worry too much about this flop decision. Seems pretty clear to me. Turned the straight flush, and they're betting pretty big. I could, click it back and be like, hey, you want to 3-bet? I think that would have been okay, but I just called and I'm like, yeah, you can just keep betting. It's cool. And they bet 2/3 pot because their bet size is so big. I feel like going big here made a lot of sense. If they made a small bet size, I would maybe just want to make a small bet size exploitatively, just trying to get a little more money in the pot, but thinking they probably don't have that much. But because they bet 2/3 pot, I think they're pretty strong. And I'm fine with potting it. This is a hand I think mostly I want to check out tomorrow and get a sense like what do they have? And in order, the idea of that isn't to search for validation in my play or not. It's just to increase kind of the ability, the intuition in terms of population reads. Like players like this, when they play a hand like this and bet fold the river, what sorts of hands am I seeing, right? And it's not like we don't want to... That's another one of those things where we don't want to make a big conclusion from small data, but we want to take in that data and kind of assimilate it into our intuition, right? And I trust myself to be able to do that and not draw conclusions that are too certain, right? The key is this sense of certainty and not becoming over certain of things where we have a little bit of data, and that should just lean us this way or that way, right? We don't want to overcommit, then we're off balance. I just read The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin yesterday, and then I read my own book, Way of the Poker Warrior. So I'm very much into this poker or chess game, and push-pull martial arts kind of analogies in my brain. So I highly recommend both books, especially Josh's book. My book, I'm going to work on things like that more going forward and hopefully have better examples. Okay, and maybe do a version for Pot Limit Omaha. We'll see. All right, so here, Ace, King, 3, Queen, Ace, A.K.A. tray. I decide to open raise. Is this, let's see if this is just a pre-flop question. Oh yeah, flop is just like whatever. Pre-flop, it's a little different situation than if I'm a regular hijack raiser. I am going to check. I think this is more like what we want to be raising in the low jack, I think, if there's a blind behind us. But maybe we can play our regular hijack range. Ace of spades, king of diamonds, queen of diamonds, 3 of hearts. RFI in hijack or no. And we're just going to treat it like that, understanding that this situation was special, but we generally want to try and make small adjustments for situations like this, but we don't want to build our strategies off of them because they're so uncommon, right? We want to build our strategy off the regular scenario and then learn how to adjust to unusual scenarios. So first I'll look at the under the gun raise first in. This is going to be ace high with 2 Broadway cards. With a single suit, ace, king, queen, 4 with the king, queen suited. It says is a play from this position. So this seems like a very clear play. Like the 3 and the 4 are not very different. They're not significantly different. Oh, hey! Yeah. Hold on a second. Good to be back. Okay. So, the 3 and the 4 aren't going to make that much of a difference. And remember, we did play this from the hijack. So the hijack is going to be an even more clear play. It says ace, king, 10, 3 with the king 10 suited as a play. So we're going to say clear play, but near the cusp. Okay. So how many more we got? 2 more. Okay, cool. King, queen, 9, deuce. There's a limper, and then we call. We overlimp. So this isn't something I have a chart for, right? I can look up what positions do I play this from, right? So let's look at button, and we're like, okay, button RFI other. Double suited king 9 5 4. It wants to raise from the button. So open raise from the button. Important distinction. So this is clearly a hand we're going to play on the button, right? Or we're going to open raise. So cutoff RFI. What kind of hands are they looking at? Queen 6 5 3. So this feels like it's very clearly an open raise from the cutoff as well. So if it's an open raise from the cutoff and there's a limper in the cutoff, I think we certainly can raise it. And it's, I think, more of a stylistic question, like, do we want to open... Yeah, I think we're even going to open raises from under the gun, like king, jack, 7, 6. The deuce is a pretty bad card, but I think it doesn't swing it. So we're going to make a note about this one as well. We're going to say king of hearts, queen of hearts, 9 of diamonds, 2 of diamonds. RFI from all positions, probably. Definitely from cutoff and button. ISO raise, probably better than overlimp as played. So yeah, this is I think I probably should have raised this, but I don't hate it. And again, I was looking at this player in the small blind, thinking, well, what if they 3-bet? Well, what if they 3-bet? Maybe I fold, right? Or if they're really aggressive, maybe I call. but like they haven't 3-bet before. They've just been raising. And if they raise, like, do I want to limp call? Probably. So I don't hate this hand, but I think raising is probably better. But I don't think that with a high level of confidence. Right, and then this board, like, it checks to me, and I just put a bet out there and they fold. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it's pretty straightforward. Again, this is the sort of situation where if my opponents are interested in their hands, I'm not that interested in mine. But when they're not that interested in their hands, I'm pretty interested in my hand. I think it's pretty good against two kind of like disinterested ranges. Okay. Final hand of the day of this thing. Folds. Whoa! Oh, right. Okay. So another pre-flop situation. We're basically going to be grinding pre-flop for a while. Jack of hearts, 5 of hearts, 4 of diamonds. RFI from cutoff or no? I think this is too tight. Was the player behind me kind of loose? I'm not sure. The big blind is a player I want to play hands with, so I can actually probably expand my range a little bit here, if anything. The rake's high, so I wouldn't go too wild with that. But let's look at, ace and 2 wheel cards, right, with a suited jack. So here I've got ace king 4-3 with a suited king 4. Okay. Ace 6-5-4 with a 6-5-4 all connect with a suited ace. I'd say this is worse than ace king 4-3, right? I mean, the 5-4 is a little better than the 4-3. So, if the jack is a queen or a king, play it. But I think the fold was correct. So, from a balanced, like, what ranges I should be playing in a vacuum, more like in a 1-2 game in PLO 200, that's what the data's for. But it should be more or less applicable for this. But, yeah, I'm going to say close, but fold is probably good. Play if J is a K or suited to the A, right? So if I was suited to the ace, clear play. I'm pretty confident I would have played it. So yeah, okay. We're going to wrap up the session review there. This was just a fold, right? Yeah. And that's that. All right. So thank you for joining. Please follow, subscribe, like. All those things are super helpful in terms of trying to build a channel, both on Twitch and on YouTube. I'm planning to make a video like this every day. We'll see how long I maintain that momentum. But if I get support or just people who are interested, I'm much more likely to follow through on it and remain consistent. Again, my goal here isn't to teach you, like, as an expert, here's how you should play PLO. My goal is to become an expert over time, and more so to show the process by which I am learning the game, and a process that I think should be duplicable, that I think you can, you don't have to do it exactly the same way I do, but it's like, here's an example of someone trying to learn a skill and get it to a higher level. And, you can follow along, take what suits you, leave what doesn't, and feel free to make suggestions, both in terms of just like how to play individual hands, how to go about showing what I'm doing, and and just like for the channel and stuff like that. Constructive feedback, always welcome. Once again, thanks for joining, and I'll see you tomorrow. Cheers.